He is the host of Breaking Through Glass Ceilings and the Wrestling Realm podcast. We welcome Brian H. Waters onto Hoopsology. How's it going, Brian?
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's going well. Glad you put the H in there. Some people don't, and even though it's everywhere, but I always got to give my dad props, especially while he's still here, because obviously, well, my middle name is his first name, so I'm
Gotcha.
like, Dad, I'm taking you everywhere I go with me. But there's also the NFL player who like won Man of the Year, whose name is Brian Waters. So I want to keep that separate. I never did anything that great to be Man of the Year in the NFL.
Well, thanks for coming on the show. Really looking forward to talking to you. And just some background on me, Brian. I am a huge wrestling fan. So once I came across your Twitter handle, and I just had to have you on to kind of discuss what's becoming a growing topic these days, and that is kind of like my two worlds of basketball and pro wrestling kind of meshing together. So let's get into it and let's talk about what recently happened. Now it's Trey Young unexpectedly appearing on SmackDown in Madison Square Garden, being the heel no less, getting tons of boos. What does she make of that? He's also going to be involved with the New Year's, I'm not sure it's New Year's Day or New Year's Eve pay per view for WWE. So obviously he's going to have a little bit more of a connection to WWE going forward. What does she make of his appearance, and what do you make of the relationship going forward?
Well, I thought it was great. One of the things with this, we've seen in pro wrestling where they always bring the baby face, right? So New York, you would have expected a Julius Randle or someone, but instead, getting Trey Young. One of the things is we know a couple things. So with AEW coming along, WWE is going to be, kind of hitting some more home runs, in my opinion. So we knew that AEW, if there was a weekend to be won last weekend, it was obviously them, with Brian Danielson and Adam Cole and Ruby Soho coming to their team. But then WWE said, that's all right, we still got the Garden. And at the end of the day, I'm one to say the Garden is the house that Vince McMahon built, right? I know that it's Patrick Ewing's home for basketball fans out there. But Vinnie Mac and his dad been having the Garden on lock for over 70 years. So to me, it's the house that the McMahons built. And to bring out Trey Young, especially when they announced that he would be there for the New Year's Day special,
Yeah.
it made so much sense. And you can see a lot of times you can see when people are kind of phoning it in, but it looked like Trey Young is kind of a wrestling fan. For him to go out
For sure.
there and get involved in the match. And I was like, he was a little bit green because
Yeah.
he held on too long.
He
If we could
did.
look at it from a kayfabe standpoint, he
Yeah.
held him a little too long. I was like, Trey, I tweeted at Brian H. Waters, Trey, you gotta let go. The referee watched. You got caught red-handed. But I thought that was good. It was something different, like I said, just to have him come out there. I don't think they'll go back to New York again before New Year's Day, but it would be cool to kind of see if they went back and then maybe somebody from the Knicks came out. We and maybe we don't have to do the whole Malone versus Dennis Rodman again, but just to kind of have that back and forth banter. And Trey Young ate it up like a heel should. He was a heel during the NBA game, and for the basketball fans who may not know, he was the bad guy during the NBA game in the playoffs, and it transitioned to wrestling. And that's what it was. I thought it was great.
So, what do you make of kind of this relationship with pro wrestling? I would say within the last decade a decade or so, I would say kind of shedding that kind of taboo image, and people know it's entertainment. There's no kind of like mystery or kind of BS going on. It is what it is in terms of what kind of entertainment that it's offering to its fans. What do you kind of make in terms of like a Trae Young appearance nowadays compared to if this was like the 90s? It seemed way more taboo. You mentioned, Karl Malone and Dennis Rodman. That was, very taboo back then.
Mhm.
Very just like frowned upon. Can you kind of go through that relationship in terms of the evolution, what we saw in the 90s compared to now?
I mean, it would be cool if we could keep kayfabe alive, right? Unfortunately, we can't be so it's understandable. I do think it's really cool though now that, they kind of it's not a thing where they're insulting our intelligence because I mean it's so easy to get access to this information. Before you had to pay, not an arm and a leg, but either pay for the 199 Mean Gene hotline or you paid for PW Torch or stuff like that. so you could get the inside scoop. Now, it's as simple as going on to Twitter. So I think just having people understand at the end of the day, it is entertainment. It's just like a movie. It's just like, let's say, a reality TV show. It's presented for us right in front of us. I think when people can sit back, suspend their disbelief, and if you have a hard time doing so, watch it with children. That'll be the easy way to suspend your disbelief and just go out there and cheer for who you want to cheer for and boo who you want to boo. And it's fun when they do get celebrities involved. I mean, we look at the Paul brothers getting involved at WrestleMania. They're natural heels, right? And we couldn't wait to see Kevin Owens deliver a stunner to, I think it was Logan Paul. So I think it's cool that when they do this, because it also puts them on Sports Center and it broadens the audience. So like you and I know, okay, Trey Young is on SmackDown. That's pretty cool. But somebody who maybe we grew up watching wrestling with that's not watching anymore, they might say, well, let me turn on wrestling to see because Trey Young is on there. Let's see what this is about. And it ultimately brings more eyeballs to the product.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, and it's good to see them to utilize Trey Young as a
Mm,
heel because you brought up Logan Paul. They're using him as like a baby face, which didn't make any
mhm.
sense. You even saw with Floyd Mayweather, he was kind of the baby face against the Big Show before they kind of turned him later. So it's I don't know, it's obvious in terms of some
Mhm.
celebrities in terms of what role they have, and yet WWE sometimes they go the opposite way. So it was
And you can make the argument with Floyd Mayweather. He's Pretty Boy Floyd coming into that. And he slowly shifted the Money Mayweather. So you can say that, Vince McMahon and Triple H helped create that character.
That's a good point. I think going into it, it was such a heel move.
Mhm,
When he debuted, I mean, that's when Big Show lost all that weight, and now it's in Las
mhm.
Vegas. And so he came out the Big Show as a babyface, and then he beat up Rey Mysterio. And there was the whole thing where Mayweather was in Mysterio's corner, which is like why would he be in Rey Mysterio's corner? But I digress. Anyways, I think you're right. The evolution to where it went and the WrestleMania match, I think that was very entertaining in terms of how that was presented. So their celebrity integration has always been on point. Matt, do you have a question?
Yeah, quick follow up. I mean, you mentioned in this conversation, two very different eras of celebrity appearances. And obviously, one of the major differences right now is social media. And you mentioned like greater access to all of this for the fans. Do you feel like social media amplifies appearances like the one that Trey Young had this past week? How different does it feel for fans having that social media aspect? And does it help the sport of wrestling?
Oh yeah, definitely. You look at before there was Cardi B. She was going back and forth with Lacey Evans, tweeting, and I think Cardi B started mentioning like all the wrestlers that she grew up watching, and you could see like, oh well, she's a genuine fan. And then her and Lacey Evans, and then you wonder if it's a work or a shoot. And I think that helps amplify everything. I'll be interested. I didn't really check Trey's Twitter feed too much, but it would be interesting to see him go along and see how much he does this. You know what I mean? I think before people were kind of looking at him as the next Steph Curry, as far as just that lovable guy who can shoot threes, right? Small, big heart, shoot threes, and everyone's like, oh yeah, we love him. But then when he goes out there and silence New York of all places, he easily gets booed, right? And maybe Curry would have did the same thing if it was a playoff, which well, not really, because Curry's that he did that to the Cavaliers, but we seen a different side, and that's how Trey Young showed, like, hey, I can be the bad guy, I can be that heel. And you got to remember, one of his biggest inspirations was Kobe Bryant. So if Kobe Bryant, I don't know if Kobe was necessarily a wrestling fan because you didn't see him making too many appearances, but there's no doubt about it, as much as like he's my favorite NBA player of all time, favorite athlete of all time, but there's no doubt about it. Kobe was a heel most of his prime, and that's what we saw with Trey Young. So I think it definitely amplifies everything. And the social media aspect, it just ultimately brings it's going to bring Trey Young fans because I'm pretty sure at this point they're going to be in Atlanta. That's his house. Um, for a lot of people, obviously y'all are professionals, so y'all know about the Dominique Wilkins and the Dikembe Mutombos, but a lot of people don't really remember a big megastar from the Hawks. They wouldn't. I don't think they would consider anybody from that Al Horford, Dennis Schroeder team a megastar. Where you're going
Totally.
to get a yeah, you're going to get a mega. You have a megastar right now in Trae Young, and so therefore when they go to Atlanta, oh, he's going to eat that up, and the fans there are going to love him, and he'll be a babyface on that night.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I love that he turned the heel card in New York City. I think it's something that not only was great for him, not only was great for Atlanta, but I think is good for the NBA at large. Because I think this day and age, I mean, you look at maybe Joel Embiid. I can't think of
Mhm.
many other heels aside from Trae Young and Joel Embiid. So I think it's been great overall for the league. Justin, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think with Trey Young, it was really good to see him embrace that role because I think a lot of NBA players now they're obsessed with their image and social media. So if they do
Mhm.
something a little bit heelish, they don't want to take the heat on social media and then they have to apologize. It's great to see Trey Young like double down and just in terms of just him being a villain in New York, because that's something easily a lot of players would do. Be like, "Well, I'm sorry, I love New York, I love the Guard and all
Mhm.
this," and he did not back down from that. So it was cool to see
It's
him kind of,
refreshing.
yeah, just take the kind of that Reggie Miller aura and kind of run with it. So it was refreshing
Mhm.
to see in a playoff setting.
It's funny. I tweeted that I said he was the biggest heel since Reggie Miller when I did the GIF with Reggie Miller doing the choke.
I want to kind of ask you, Brian. The Last Dance came out last
Mhm.
year, and there was a kind of huge wrestling component that was kind of overshadowed. I mean, it was discussed, but I'm sure since you were a huge wrestling fan, that was a massive deal. I'm sure to you, just seeing Dennis Rodman and Karl Malone, actually go at it while there's the NBA Finals as well. Can you kind of elaborate on that? Because I feel like the Last Dance, they covered it, they did the whole story about Carmen Electra in Las Vegas, but I don't think they really went into kind of how big of a deal that was. I mean, wrestling in the '90s was massively popular. Can you
Mhm.
kind of go over what you remember from that time period, and also what you saw in the Last Dance in terms of that wrestling connection as well?
Well, let's one of the things that was interesting to me was if you remember, so I don't know if y'all like, I'm 35, so I don't know if like you
Same
remember it
age.
Same
vividly.
Yep.
age. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So if you remember, I should say this in Baltimore, and I didn't know anybody who was not a Bulls fan at the time, right? Michael Jordan, the most popular player in the world. I think maybe ran into two people who were rooting for Utah. So when this happened, I thought it was interesting that even though it makes sense, right? But I still thought it was interesting that we were seeing people cheer for Michael Jordan, therefore cheering for Scottie Pippen and Dennis Rodman. But then on Nitro, you're booing Dennis Rodman because of his association with Hollywood Hogan, and then cheering Karl Malone. I'm like, wait, people actually like Karl Malone? I didn't think anybody liked Karl Malone outside of Utah. That was the weirdest thing,
Right.
And so you have all this going on, and I believe the payoff actually happened like after the finals, if I'm not
I
mistaken.
think you're correct. Yeah.
Yeah, so and that would have been at Bash at the Beach, which primarily is in July. But it was, and then you had everything that happened on Jay Leno. You
Yeah.
had Rodman and Hogan taking over, and you wasn't going to put Jay Leno in the ring too much. A couple bumps here and there, but people wanted to see, especially you remember on the court, like the way Dennis Rodman played, and he would get in people's head. So people wanted to see him and Karl Malone kind of go at it. And I thought that was well done, and especially for it to take place during those finals, at the height of the Monday Night Wars, dare say the height of WCW as well, because I don't think Hogan had dropped the title just yet, if I'm not mistaken. I think he was still champion and he would
Yeah.
drop it to Goldberg right afterwards. But you saw all of this happen, and I thought that was a good thing. It would have been nice to see you see it more in Dennis Rodman's documentary for obvious reasons, but it just goes to show you there's always been a connection with wrestling and sports. If we go all the way back to WrestleMania 1, where Muhammad Ali was the special enforcer with Hogan and Mr. T against the late great Paul Orndorff and the late great Roddy Piper. You could even go back to and even um Muhammad Ali versus Antonio Inoki.
That's right.
And then you could go to WrestleMania 2 where Refrigerator Perry was in that battle royal. Lawrence Taylor wrestled in the main event of WrestleMania
He did.
11. So there's always been that connection.
I want to shift to just the NBA. Your thoughts on what you saw this season and even last season. I mean, it's just honestly, it's kind of like one big, like 2 season blob, just considering the bubble and then the season falling with no fans. What was your engagement in terms of your fan interest? And now we're heading to this new season in which things are back to normal from a television standpoint, with fans back into the stands. And now we have this new kind of X factor with COVID in terms of players, might be missing time just because they've contracted this virus. What did you make of this everything going on the last couple of years? Your feelings of just watching the NBA as a product?
Man, it was weird. You know, it was. I mean, we really went on an emotional ride because losing Kobe Bryant, it felt like everything went downhill from there. Right? We After he passed away, then they canceled games for a couple of days, so people could kind of get themselves together. And then afterwards, it's like, okay, we back to playing basketball. We honored him at the All-Star game. Then boom, we stop again. And like you said, it was like kind of like a season and a half because that was we talked about NBA 2K, the
Yeah.
video game. When that came out, that was one of the things people were complaining about. It's like, why would I buy 2K21 if it's not a different roster? Now, granted, they've made some upgrades and you can always update the rosters throughout. And I remember after I was like, wait a minute, it really is the same thing. But it was cool though. With 21, you had, if you bought like the Legends edition like I did, you got the Kobe coin and Kobe on the cover. But when you look at everything, last year was very interesting because I knew from the jump. I ain't gonna say I knew. I felt from the jump that we were not going. There was no way in the world we was going to get a finals rematch. Right? As big of a Laker fan I am, I knew that the season was going to be rough because the turnaround was so quick. I mean, we're talking end of September, then jumping right back into it in December. So the turnaround time was so quick. I know LeBron made that he was going, kind of hang court and all that, but obviously, unfortunately, him and Anthony Davis got hurt, and then the injuries caught up with him. So I'm very interested in to see what happens this year. I did think last year it was refreshing to see two new teams in the NBA Finals. When you think about
Agreed.
just just the past decade, you can almost kind of say like you pick a year, right? Actually, probably past 25 years. You pick a year and then you figure, okay, this team is going to be in the finals for the next few years. We had the Bulls era, the Lakers era, the Heat era, the Spurs era, the Warriors era, the Cavaliers era. So, to get two teams that, and I don't think we'll see those two teams again. I don't think we'll see either one of them again, to be honest with you. I think we'll get the matchup that everybody wants, and that being the Lakers and the Nets. I think that's the money matchup. We missed out on a Lakers Cavaliers back in the day. So, I think we'll get the Lakers and the Nets. But it was definitely refreshing to see two teams. I was rooting for Chris Paul. It was kind of a now or never thing. I don't know if y'all got the same thing, but for me, I always felt like for him it was either then or never because of the team he put together. But then they just seemed like the moment got too big for them.
Totally. I have to ask, Brian, how are you feeling now heading into this season for the Lakers? How do you feel? Fans oftentimes have, I think, better insight than a lot of media personalities or people looking at the league at large, because you guys are looking really in depth at these teams. How are you feeling about Russell Westbrook and that sort of marriage to this team with the Lakers? You feeling good about them matching together?
Oh yeah. I feel good because Russ and Melo, they're hungry. They haven't tasted the championship. Melo's never tasted the finals. So they're hungry. Then there's Dwight Howard, where like it just seems like for some reason he's married to Los Angeles. And I don't think he ever wanted to leave. I remember him writing his caption on Instagram about "I'm coming back," and then he had to hurry up
Yeah.
and take it down. So
It's like the most Dwight Howard thing ever.
yeah,
Right.
and it's so weird because this is a guy that was at one point one of the top 5 players in the league. He goes to LA and then he becomes one of the most hated people in the league. But and then he comes back and he's loved again. But I think that I feel good about this team. I know a lot of people are saying age and everything, but I think with this comes wisdom. You're not going to have the well, one for me, even though we had like with the Lakers, they had Karl Malone and Gary Payton. I still will say this to this day. I think the only reason why the Lakers didn't win the championship, not because of Kobe and Shaq not being able to get along, but because of the fact that I just think Karl Malone's not a great person, and it just wasn't in the cards. Because when you look at it afterwards, Gary Payton went on to win the championship with Shaq in Miami.
Gotcha.
So, but I do think that and then I don't think it's Scottie Pippen and Charles Barkley and Hakeem Olajuwon. It just felt like they just, they kept pointing the fingers. But you look at like LeBron and Melo are close friends. They've been close friends for over 20 years. And then you have Russell Westbrook, who is probably one of the most loyal people you can meet from what you hear. When Kevin Durant up and left him, and this is from Russell Westbrook's perception, I read this long article, and he kept saying, I like my team. I like my team. He didn't want to give up on them. And I felt to this day, I always felt he was going to stay with OKC forever. But it's just that, they wanted to go in a different direction. But I think he would have stayed and rode it out if they could, But so with that being said, I do think the Lakers have a great shot at winning again. And I think because they have these people in place, it'll be Boston Celtics-esque, where you have the veterans understanding their role to do with the ultimate goal, and that's win a championship.
I want to ask you on that point, how do you think the Westbrook-LeBron dynamic is going to work? I mean, Westbrook
especially in
always
the
has
fourth
the ball.
quarter.
Yeah.
That's my huge question.
Exactly. Yeah. That's Matt. So how do you address that situation? I'm curious.
Well, Westbrook, I mean, the thing is, like, him and Kevin Durant worked better than last year. They were up 3-1. It's just that to me, both of them decided to not involve everybody else once they got up 3-1. And that's what I think, that he's going to look back and he's going to learn from that mistake. This is the best player he's ever played with, or we'll say, for the second, tied for the best player he's ever played with. So he's on a team where, it's not like there's an argument of, is this person better or that person better? No, everybody knows LeBron James is the best player on the Lakers. Then you got somebody like Anthony Davis, who's a dynamic person down bottom who can finish but also stretch the floor. So that's something, he's getting. So he's got, I think when it comes to that fourth quarter, he's going to understand his role, but it's also, it is, kind of like a crazy decoy, right? Because you're going to have to pick your battle. If you key in on LeBron, he's got AD, or he can, go for it himself. And then he's going to have the rim protection down bottom. And then you still have Carmelo, who is a walking bucket regardless. So I think everything's going to be fine.
It makes me feel a lot better for them too. I think that Rondo signing is so huge. We had Trevor Lane on the podcast last year who covers the Lakers, and he was talking about how Rondo was the guy who was able to get between LeBron and the other guys and like kind of check LeBron, like, hey, you can't roll your eyes at Kyle Kuzma like that. Like if he misses a shot, like you're putting him off like that. So, like you said, there's plenty of experience there. I think there's some question marks, but Westbrook is a hard ass too. And that's something that I think they missed last year. So, to your point, there may be more than meets the eye with this addition.
And they're getting two of them, But I also think, I'm glad you brought that up, because when you look at somebody like a Rondo, to me, Rondo's a Hall of Famer person, right? A Hall of Fame mind. The stats might not put him there, but I mean, I know they say he hates the term playoff Rondo, but I think we coined that term because what we've seen is that when he's in these series, he knows the key thing about playoffs is making adjustments, right? And he understands that. He understands how to make adjustments and how to not be adjusted. So that's the thing, and I think that's exciting. It's almost a cheat code because you have both of them, right? And it's also going to lighten the load in a lot of cases so that you don't have to burn through somebody's minutes. So that's what's going to be fun. And I think maybe we might see Rondo kind of get in between LeBron and Westbrook. But, clearly, like, these guys wanted to play together. And that's the thing. It's not like I remember hearing the saying that when I don't know how true this is. Y'all would probably know better than me. But when Melo in 2014 was on his tour around the same time when LeBron went back to Cleveland, one of the things that kind of turned him off about Chicago was that that Derrick Rose wasn't like, oh, I want him on the team. You know, it's kind of like Rose had the mentality that he wanted to beat everybody. He wanted to take that Bulls team and beat everybody. So, but I think with them guys wanting to play together, I think that's what makes this the best thing right now.
Well, you're right. I think they're definitely hungry in the case of Melo and Westbrook. So just being in that dynamic where the Lakers have recently won a title, I mean, it's great motivation just to kind of make it work. So I think it's going to be fun to really to see as well.
And work ethic. You know, I know that
Yeah.
team that also they share a arena with. One of the issues that I was reading is that Kawhi Leonard always it's his time, his way, and I don't think you have to worry about with the real team of Los Angeles. You know what I mean? Because everybody knows you come to work. First of all, you put on that purple gold. You want to honor, in my opinion, the greatest Laker of all time, and that's Kobe Bryant. And one of the things, like I've been reading the book Mamba Mentality, you hear the dynamic of the importance of showing up to work early, leaving the gym, coming back, going there early and getting the reps in. And I think, he would be proud looking at this team that they have. I don't think he would be saying, oh, they're too old.
For sure. I think he'd be very proud and at practice multiple times.
I think I felt Steve Ballmer's heart breaking when you said the real team in LA just then. That was nice.
Go to San Diego. Get out of Los Angeles. Like, go get your own place, man.
I agree with that.
We hang up banners. Yeah, we hang up banners. They hang up selfies.
Yeah, they need a team. Yeah.
It's so sad that they don't have a team like that. That makes me sad. Like, the people see correction, that they don't have an NBA team,
right.
But they make up
Super
for it.
Sonics.
They make up for it with the WNBA team because, man, do they lose? It feels like, goodness gracious.
They definitely have a great fan base for sure. Hopefully someday the league can make it happen because it sucked. I think I saw a great documentary on just how they lost the team and just all the fallout. It's terrible. And they're great for the Storm. I mean, they're awesome. So they're great fans supporting the Seahawks and their soccer team too. So one day, hopefully.
Yeah.
Well, Brian, thank you very much for joining the show. Really appreciate it. Can you let our viewers and listeners know where they can find you on social media and then also your podcast and shows and anything else you're working on as well?
Oh, appreciate that. So, you can find me at Brian H. Waters on all social media platforms. 1T in Waters, not like Ricky Williams. As like I said, water like you drink. Add S. You can find me on Wrestling Realm, spelt with a W with alliteration. Shout out to my mother. That was her idea when we put the show together. We're celebrating our 10-year anniversary, so I'm really excited about that. We have a lot of cool stuff. For the Attitude Era fans out there and the NWO fans, check out our YouTube channel, youtube.com/TheWrestlingRealm. You may remember the NWO paid promotions video they did years ago.
Yeah.
Well, a few years ago, me and Dwayne reenacted that. Shout out to him. His vision as we put that together was so much fun to do. And then we also did the DX when they got in trouble by the USA Network. And so we did something similar to that. So we have a lot of fun with the show. It's not just us talking wrestling, but we do like funny promos and skits. It all started just from us when we were television production majors at Morgan State University, and we created the show as a way to talk wrestling and help us brush up and sharpen our production skills. But you can also find other podcasts, Breaking Through Glass Ceilings, where I introduce my network to the world. I'm blessed to be connected to a lot of great people, so I interview them about their stories and how they got to where they are. So make sure y'all check that out. And Justin and Matt, I really appreciate y'all bringing me on here to talk basketball. I don't really talk I get a chance to talk too much. I'm always brought on to talk wrestling or, sometimes the Ravens, but, so it's really very refreshing. I really enjoy the show.
Yeah, really enjoyed the chat. And next time we'll have to talk about your belt collection.
Oh, yeah, we can talk, 15 of them. So I'll definitely, with my, I actually have a top 5 belts show. I did my top 5 out of my collection. At the time, the collection was at 12 when we recorded it, but it's fairly new. Well, we dropped it on August 7th for my birthday, but we did my top 5 out of all my collection, my top 5 favorites.
That's awesome. Well, Brian, we really enjoyed the chat as well. Thanks for coming on the show. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.